So I'm so sorry. We when we left off, I think you were talking about what you knew about John's growing up in Saratoga Springs.
Mm-hmm. He always lived in this house, and it's the house that I live in now. He never wanted to live anywhere else. As a matter of fact, when he passed here in the house. He just wanted to come home and be in his own home.
The house he grew up in.
The neighborhood was, yep, the house he grew up in. Yeah, when his parents decided to retire, they moved to their camp, and we bought the house. It's in a neighborhood that was filled with all his aunts and uncles. They're the same people that he knew when he was growing up. So it was a good place to live. It still is.
And what do you said that the neighborhood was largely Italian. What do you know about just John's family in general? Like, did he have a lot of brothers and sisters, or?
John he had two brothers and a sister. They were older. John was the baby. He was actually a Mother's Day baby. That's the day he was born on. And when he went in the service, his brother was still serving in the army in Germany. The other brother had gotten out, and they remained close, through the years. They after John graduated in 1965, the recruiter showed up one Sunday morning at his door, and his mother answered the door, and she said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Well, I'm here to take John. He's being inducted into the Marine Corps today." And she said, "What?" He never told his parents. And she said, "Well, you wait for me." And she got dressed and she went down with them, and so that she could be there with them. But his father had served, and all his uncles, and there was a draft. But he didn't want to wait to be drafted. He went and volunteered to go into the Marine Corps. He signed up himself.
Any idea why he chose the Marine Corps?
Well, because it's the Marine Corps. Why else would you choose the Marine Corps?
Right.
That's what he wanted. And I don't think anybody else in his family had ever been in the Marine Corps.
And so how long after?
But he used to get.
I'm sorry, Diane, you go ahead.
Yep, I'm here. I'm just waiting for you to ask the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. And then I guess I lost you after that. So once he joined the Marine Corps, and then he went off to boot camp, presumably Parris Island, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Was it straight to Vietnam from there, or did he have some Marine Corps experience before he was sent over?
Well, he went into the Vietnam in November of '66. So I assumed it was all training to get ready for him, but he'd gone to Parris Island, and then he was at Camp Lejeune. And then he came back to Camp Lejeune when he came back from Vietnam.
Got it. And do you know what his job was in the Marine Corps? What was his
he was an ammunitions technician. He took care of, setting out the mines and whatever, and that's what he did. He worked with the ammunition.
And do you know what unit he was in?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. We have that. We can find that out.
Okay.
I'm almost certain that we have that already. Or if we don't have it, we can get it. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about this before, but do you mind just again? We weren't recording at the time, so do you mind just going through once more? What do you know about John's exposure to Agent Orange while he was in Vietnam?
Well, he said he was stationed at the DMZ. That's about all I know about it. But when we looked through, when he started getting sick, when he was 38 years old, we started looking through where the Agent Orange was sprayed, the most concentrated times and whatever. And it seemed to be when he was there during the time that he served. That's really all I know about it. it was used. I mean, it was used to kill the jungle, and they had to traverse the roads and whatever, and the trails. So that's really all I know about it. I mean, we really tried to look up all the information we could, but the information was really kind of sketchy.
Yeah. Yeah. But it sounds like, from what you've been able to piece together, it sounds like John's exposure was pretty much daily and pretty much sustained over a long period of time.
Exactly. Certainly all the time he was there.
So he came back from Vietnam at some point, and probably felt fortunate to have survived that experience. And as far as you know, he wasn't feeling too bad when he got home, because you met a couple of weeks later and fell in love and got married.
We did. Yep. And we moved to a little town, Richlands, outside of Camp Lejeune. And we stayed there for almost a year. And then he had separated from the Marine Corps and had, been part of the reserve for a couple of years. But he really, he wasn't really complaining.
Yeah. So physically,
Then, like maybe
physically, he seemed to feel okay at that time.
He did. And he was a strong person. He was probably the strongest person I ever knew. I mean, my husband had great upper body strength. He went to work for the local market here, for the local grocery chain, the Golub chain, as a meat manager for them. So, you're picking up sides of beef and you're putting them on the hooks and whatever. So he had a physically demanding job. Mm. And then when he was about 30, hospital, but he was there for 3 days, but there was no diagnosis. But he had numbness in his chest. He had, he said he felt like his knees were on fire, but there was no diagnosis that ever came out of it. And that was really the first time that was the beginning when we had gone back to do a timeline for when he got sick. We had gone back to when he was 38 years old.
So 38 years old. I mean, this is more than 15 years, maybe nearly 20 years after he got home. Exactly.
But this is what I've been able to find out. When you talk to people who have Agent Orange exposure, it lays dormant in their body. And then they near that 40-year mark, and whatever triggers it, it just mushrooms.
So after that initial visit to the hospital that resulted in no diagnosis, how did things unfold from there?
His health started failing him. His strength started failing him. He still worked, in the meat department, but there was issues, with his strength. He with his legs, with the pain that came with it. And then he had an accident, and he had to have a spinal fusion. But his fusion didn't really heal right. It didn't heal to make the bone that it was supposed to make the bone. And he ended up having 4 spinal fusions. And his surgeon said to him, if after the first year that his bone never really completely made a bone, he said, John, if I didn't know anything in your body. And John said, without missing a heartbeat, he said, well, I was in Vietnam. I was exposed to Agent Orange pretty intensely. And he said, then maybe you ought to go to the VA and see what they're going to do about this. But I will tell you that when my husband separated from the Marine Corps, the VA, they didn't want to listen to him. And I think it's because not enough people worked at the VA who were exposed to this, who knew about this. So going to the VA was not any road that my husband was going to take. But he had a friend who served with him in Vietnam. And he would see him maybe once or twice a year. They would come visit us, the family, they come visit us. And he said to John, I'm in touch with like 8 of the guys that we served with over there. And we're all 100%. And you're the only one who hasn't gone to the VA yet.
When
Does
you
that
say
tell you anything?
When you say we're all 100%, explain what that means for listeners who are not.
100% through Agent Orange. They were 100% through Agent Orange.
Meaning their benefits were 100% service connected, right? Their issues were service connected.
Right, to Agent Orange. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And so they were receiving 100% benefits for the treatment.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And John wasn't.
No, because John never went back to the VA after that first time. But then one day, his pain was so bad that he just could not get his head off the kitchen table. He just was up all night long and he was just racked with pain. And he called Joe and he said, "Hey, buddy, I need you to take me to the VA." And I will tell you, as bad as Joe felt himself physically, he was at our house in 40 minutes. And he took my husband to the VA. And you know what? The VA was wonderful to John. I really can't say anything bad about the medical treatment that he got there. They were really wonderful. Whatever he needed, they were able to provide for him. The problem was getting John's 100%. It took 7 years of paperwork. We had gone through the gentleman at the VA who was taking care of the comp and pen and whatever. John went for all the x-rays and whatever. They did all the reports and we get a letter saying, "Oh yeah, you're 10% years down the road. Well, yes, this is bad and you should be 30%, but we're going to round it down to 20%. I got so tired of dealing with that man that we ended up getting our own fax machine. And every time John ended up in the hospital and his condition got worse, I'd wait a few days. I'd go down to the release of information office. I'd get all the paperwork printed out for me and I'd fill out a new claim and we would fax it right to Houston Street ourselves. And it was 7 years of doing that to get John his 100%. And he was going in for one of his surgeries. And they had to have a routine x-ray taken because he was going to have surgery. And a very new x-ray technician just graduated from college. He found a spot on John's lung. And when they went in, they sent him right away to the lung doctor. And it came back that it was very, had it been not detected. So they went in and they took out half his lung and a lot of his lymph nodes. And it was
how old is John? Sorry, how old is John at this point?
John was 48 years old. So this is 10 years after his first visit to the hospital for some unexplained diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. 7 of those years spent fighting for benefits.
7, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. 7 years when he died. Well, he died at 58 years old. So it was 7 years, right, prior to that. And he only received his benefits for a year and a half. And that half year, he was terminal.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, you said you were explaining about the they took out half of his lung and what they discovered was
that he had a very aggressive form of cancer that would have killed him in 6 months had it not gone, had they not found it. So what happened a year after his surgery, I ran into the VA, to the local VA rep that was here in our county. And he said, "Oh, Diane, how you doing? How's John? Tell him that there's a new illness for Agent Orange." And he told me what it was. Well, it was exactly the. He looked at him and he said, "Well, John doesn't have lung cancer, does he?" And I said, "Well, yes, he had half his lung removed last year." And then that started the progression again with the lung cancer. So we, put more paperwork in, faxed him more stuff, did everything we could. And then one day the letter came 7 years after we started saying that he was 100%. And because during this time, I will tell you that I was working a full-time job. I had to have health insurance. He can't work, can't walk, he can't breathe. We would, well, you had to find the humor in how bad it is. Otherwise, you just go crazy. We would say that he had the whole alphabet. He had the PTSD, he had the COPD.
You and John,
just give me a minute here.
Of course, Diane. We can, we can come back to this. You and John had children, right?
Yes, we have 2 boys and a girl. Yes, sir. Yep.
And just for the sake of the timeline, I mean, I'm assuming they were born prior to John's initial visit to the hospital when he was 38 years old.
Right. By the time we were married 5 years, we had 3 children. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And tell me about the 3 children.
I don't know what to tell you. They're our kids. They're good people, and they married good people.
Well, what are their names, and who's the oldest, and who's the youngest, and who's in the middle?
My son John is the oldest, and then there's my son George, and our daughter Denise. And I know that there's a lot going on with the children of Agent Orange veterans. And I told them that if they wanted to pursue, to go ahead, if they felt that they needed that, I gave them all their father's records after he passed so that they would have everything. Just in case I wasn't here, they have the DD-214s, they have everything. They have their own ailments. Can I specifically say it's related to Agent Orange? I can't. I know that spina bifida is the one that's directly related to it, and thankfully our children did not have that. But I will tell you that in the 10 years from John, 10 years later when he passed, in those 10 years, there's so many blessings that came our way. And even though John's health was diminishing, we were able to see our children get married, our grandchildren born. And we were waiting for our 4th grandchild to be born. Truly, it had blindsided us that his cancer had come back. We had gone on vacation in January, and one morning in March, I woke up and there was dry blood on his mouth. He had coughed up blood. We had gone to the VA right away. Cancer had come back. It was in the scar between his lungs, and it surrounded his heart. And that was March 30th, and he died June 10th. But every day, our friends and family would come to this house and tell him how much he touched their lives and how much they loved him. And he was able to say that to him, which was a big stretch for my husband, because my husband was happiest when he was by himself, when there wasn't anybody around. And he was so gracious and generous to those people in those 2.5 months.
Yeah.
We thought that letter was a lie when they told us that he had the cancer. We just couldn't believe it. I can't believe it now. I can't believe that anything could kill my husband. he was so strong, you know. And then he wasn't. But my husband, I'm going to tell you, I don't want to make my husband a martyr, and nor am I a martyr for taking care of him. My husband never said, why has this happened to me? He never said, look what the government did. He never said anything of that. Never, never, never.
He was a Marine.
I was told. And he was always a Marine. And he's in the National Cemetery in Saratoga, the Gerald B.H. Solomon National Cemetery, in his dress blues.
You were saying before
so he's
about,
been there for 17 years.
I'm sorry, Diane. There's such the lag on this thing is so terrible. I really don't mean to cut you off. You know, I try to wait for a pause, but I think sometimes what I'm perceiving as a pause is just another lag in the data packets. So please forgive me. I'm really not trying to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. What I was Terry for 17 years, and I really didn't know where else to be after taking care of somebody for 20 years. So I went to the cemetery one day and I said, look, I obviously need to be here because I'm here every day. Just give me a rake. Let me rake the leaves. And they said, no, we need a volunteer here to work the phones in the office. So I've been at the cemetery for 17 years volunteering because that's where John is.
Oh, God.
So on Sundays, yeah, so on Sundays, I am in the information building. And I promised my husband that I would help any veteran acceptable amount. So, you know, it comes up in conversation, or you'll see somebody, or somebody will say something about Vietnam, and I'll say, how are you feeling? And if it's not good, they'll tell me. And so I can just tell them what we did and what I know, or direct them to the VA, or you know, to someone who can help them. And I will tell you that the other day, someone said to me, I want you to know, Diane, that I'm your number 16. So in 17 years, I've been able to help 16 people.
Get their 100%.
Yeah, get their 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is amazing. That is amazing. So you mentioned earlier, I want to talk a little bit about the in memory program. But before we do that, if you don't mind, I'd like to just circle back. You were talking earlier about the importance of finding the humor in the situation, and you were talking about the alphabet soup that John had. You know, I know that you're hesitant to make too big a deal out of this, but you know, I would like to know how you managed for all those years when John couldn't work and you had 3 children you were trying to raise, and it was all on you, and you also had to help him, you know, you also had to help him take him to doctor's appointments, you know, try and monitor his treatment, you know. I mean, you're taking care of him, you're taking care of the kids, you're the only one working. I mean, how did you get through that time?
Well, I will tell you that John did go on Social Security disability. He did do that. But it does take a toll. But you can't stop. I mean, how do you not do that? You don't leave, you know, for rich or poor, for better or worse, you know, sickness and in health. You just every day changed. You know, we called it, it's like walking on quicksand. And every time I would say, okay, John, you know, I think we got this under control. I think we can do this. Then the floor would open, and then something else would happen, and he'd end up in the hospital. You know, he couldn't keep his oxygen level. Did what you had to do. You really didn't think about it. And you don't, and when you're a caregiver for somebody else, you really don't think about yourself, because they are in so much pain. They are feeling so bad. They're so sick. How are you going to complain? So you don't. And then one day, all that caregiving is gone. And you really don't know who you are anymore. Because for 36 years, I was Mrs. John Parisi. And I was proud to be that. I loved him. I didn't always like him, but I always loved him. And all of a sudden you find yourself that your health is not really good because you didn't really pay attention to things about your health because you were so busy taking care of somebody else. Thankfully, with the 100%, I was able to get my health insurance through the VA. And when my husband died, I was 53 years old. I had already given up my job. So I had to go back to work. But I did get the DIC check, which helped because I had a mortgage and John was uninsured. And they tell you, oh, you know, you can get $10,000 of life insurance, no problem, through the VA. Well, I put in for that, and they turned down my husband because he had cancer. So I went to my congressman, who was a great guy, Jerry Solomon, and I said, look, the only reason why my husband has cancer is because of Agent Orange, and the only reason why he had Agent Orange is because he was in Vietnam. I mean, it all made perfect sense to us. And this is what the insurance company told Jerry Solomon's office. Look, we're the insurance company. We're not the government. You're not going to tell us who we're going to cover. So that was pretty lousy. That was very lousy. So I went back to work and I had a mortgage to pay off.
Were you not living? Were
my
you
husband?
Were you not living in Big John's parents' house at the time?
Yes, it was our house. Yes.
I see.
You know, things.
But there was a
come up,
mortgage on it. Yeah, gotcha.
Right. It was our house. We purchased the house. Yes.
I see.
We purchased
Okay.
the house. We lived here.
Right.
Yeah. But you know, things come up. You get a home equity loan. You think, well, we're just going to have time to pay this off. And whatever. I mean, you know, it is what it is. I mean, but you know something? It worked out. It worked out. Thank God for the DIC money. But when John was 100%, he was getting like $3,000 a month for me 100%. That's not what I got. I think my first check was like maybe $840 or $824, which I was very thankful to get because I had gone back to work. And thank God I didn't need to pick up health insurance because the VA covered me till I was 65. And then when you're 65, you have to leave the VA system. But my Champ VA, they do take care of me. I have my Medicare and I have Champ VA, and I go to the doctors who accept it. So I have no medical costs for hospitals, for doctors, no co-pays, and no co-pays for my prescriptions. And I will tell you that every month my DIC check comes in and my Social Security check comes in. I always write in my register and my checkbook, thank you, John. Because my husband suffered. And the only reason why I have that money is because he suffered.
Well, Diane, you talked a little bit about the work that you've done helping other veterans to get their 100%, and you said in 17 years you've helped 16 veterans achieve that status. What have you learned about Agent Orange and its effects as your experience has grown past just what you witnessed with John, and you've started to get to know other stories? What are the similarities that you see? What are the differences? What have you learned about the issue?
The issues is that these guys, and I say guys, I mean, certainly there were women who served, whatever. They didn't know what the hell hit them. Some of them got sick right away, but most of the people that I've talked to, they didn't get sick till they were in their 40s. And all of a sudden their whole life their health is turned upside down. And they don't feel like they deserve to get, not that my husband didn't feel that he deserved to get treated, because absolutely, but they're out looking for a handout. So when I say to them, look, you have to do this. And my thing is, it's kind of like a kick in the ass. Look, no is an unacceptable answer. You have to go back. You have to keep pursuing this. You have to keep doing this. When they signed that dotted line, it was everything, including up to their life. Everything was included. But they're a different breed. They are well respected. They're not looking for something for nothing. They don't feel that they deserve to almost get that money. And I'm saying this because that's the way my husband was. But I will tell you that it wasn't so much the money that had him have a peace of mind as it was the acknowledgement that, yeah, something was very wrong. And absolutely, all this illness and all these pains and all you're going through and all these nightmares and all this shit in your head, it's real. And now we're telling you that we understand and we're going to take care of you.
And that's what the 100% means, right? That's what it really, I mean, it has a very kind of functional financial implication, but what it really represents is the government, as you said, acknowledging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we sat there the night we got the letter, we stayed up all night long. We were drinking tea all night long. We just couldn't believe it, because now I could stay home. I could quit my full-time job. I have to tell you, Michael, I would get up in the morning and go to me. All I had to do was turn it on. That's all. And I'd come home some days and I'd be home, it would be late getting home, with daylight savings and whatever. And I'd walk into the house and there was that empty cup of coffee, and that coffee had not been turned on. And I can't tell you what a long walk it is to walk to that bedroom and not knowing what you're going to find. Is this the day that he's just done being sick because he's just so tired of being sick? My husband, he faced Agent Orange. He faced it head on. He stayed until he just couldn't stay anymore. But when you come in and you find that and you know that he isn't up today, what am I going to do? I can't stay home. I can't stay home. And that letter of the acceptance of the agent of the 100% allowed me to stay home and to take care of my husband, myself, 24/7.
That's a lot. That's a lot to bite off, Diane, even with the financial support. That's a lot to bite off to take care of somebody 24/7. I'll tell you.
I think where.
Sorry, you go ahead.
I think where they really failed was that nobody told us, nobody sat us down and said, look, this is what your percentages mean. This is what making 75% means. This is what 100% means. I read everything I could get my hands on, everything. And I find these little blurbs that would say stuff like, which is where I live. If you're a veteran, you get 10% off your real estate taxes, county, city taxes. You get another 15% if you are a combat veteran. So most of them know that you get that 25%. So I read this little article that said that if you have any disability from the government, New York State's going to give you half of whatever that disability is. So my husband was 100%. We didn't know that he got an extra 50%. Now our real estate taxes are reduced by 75%, 10, 15, another 50%. Nobody explained anything to us. I read another little article and it said that dollars worth of grants to accommodate your house to your disabilities. We didn't find that out until about September, and we were going to make our garage basement area into a 2-bedroom apartment for John and I, because there were stairs in our house. Well, by the next March, that money had all gone away because now John's terminal. So we had done a few projects in the fall. We had gotten the contractor in the winter, the architect drew down. And let me tell you something, Michael, when I used to go to the VA and I would sit in the waiting rooms because they did have women's services there, whatever, but I'd be sitting there and there would be a group of men next to me and I'd say, "Are you a veteran?" They'd say, "Yes." And I would say, "Do you know that you get 10% and another 15 and another half of whatever your disability is?" You know, because it was so hard for us. Why should anybody have to fight so hard to get benefits that are there? And it's your money. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I hear this a lot from people who've successfully fought for benefits, is that like you have to have an advocate, you know. If you're the person who's sick, it's the amount of energy that it takes to discover all the things that are available to you, and that's just the beginning, right? The real energy comes in pursuing them, because if you fill out a form the wrong way, you're denied, right? I mean, it's just a constant battle. And without an advocate, I mean, how many veterans just got that first no and walked away?
Absolutely. And I will tell you how many men go to, and I say men, how many men go to the doctors by themselves? They don't want their wives going with them. And we realized that we had to work together as a team. As our lives changed, I used to tell people our life was as big as a beach ball, and John's illness was as small as a golf ball. And when John died, Agent Orange. So you have to have that person to go with you and to listen. My God, 4 ears are always better than 2 ears at the doctor. And they'd be saying things, or they say, "How you feeling, big guy? How you feeling, Big John?" They always referred to my husband as Big John. And, "Oh, I'm doing good." And I would go and I'd say, "Well, yeah, but what about this?" He went for a breathing test one time at the VA. And the guy goes, "How you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm feeling fine." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Just a minute. I want you to make my husband walk down to the elevators and walk back again." That was a pretty good walk. My husband looked at me and he wasn't happy, okay? But the doctor looked at me and he said, "Okay, John, I want you to walk down the elevators." Well, he had barely any breath left in him. And when they did the numbers on him, they understood how fast his oxygen levels fell. We kind of laughed about it later. It's like, look, you want to be taking the walk to the elevator every time I come? Because if you're not going to tell them, then I'm going to make you walk to the elevator every time. Kid, you do. And this is not related to my husband at all, but this is related to something that happened at the VA. I was waiting in the release of information office to get records on John. And an older man came in. He probably was World War II. And they had a new person who was just filling in behind the desk. And if you ask me, he was really rude to this older veteran. "Oh, well, you didn't fill this paper out right. You didn't do that." So I went up to the older man and I said, "Let me help you do this." And we did. And he got his information. And then he left and he thanked me. reason why you have a job here is because it's people like that man. If you're not going to talk to them respectfully, then what are you doing here? And then I went in and I reported him. But that man needed an advocate. Just so happened it was my turn to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
I really
Wow.
don't like bullies.
No, I'm getting that sense. It's I don't know. It's kind of trying to figure out how to express this. It's beautiful, that part of you, right? That part that says, wait a second, this isn't right. I'm going to do something about it. But it's also just incredibly disappointing that the person who was actually employed there, who was drawing a paycheck, right, to be there, didn't feel it was his role to be an advocate.
Filling in, because the girls who ran that office, oh my God, they were just tops. I have to tell you, when John went back to the VA, he got excellent care. And when he couldn't go anymore to the VA, the doctor came here, his doctor came here to do house calls for him.
Wow.
I can't complain about the care he got. Although I will tell you that one night his oxygen dropped a lot and he was in the hospital. And we got a call, my daughter and I got a call saying that you better come to the hospital now because we're bringing John down to ICU and we're going to have to intubate. So I knew what that meant. That meant the special nursing home. I knew exactly what that meant. And we're driving like 90 miles an hour to the hospital to go down there. We get to the ICU and the nurse comes out and I said, I'm here to see my husband. She said, well, he's not here, Mrs. Parisi. He decided he wasn't going to come. I said, what? She said, he's up in the ward. So my daughter and I, now we cried all the way 90 miles an hour down to get to the hospital. We get up to the ward. He's in his bed. He's got his cane laying across his chest. The pulmonologist, the guy who's filling in for the pulmonologist that night, is there, and he's in a ward with 3 other guys. I said, what are you doing? He said, they tried to get me. They came to get me, and I fought them off. I said, look, you can come in here. I'm not going to get you all, but I'm going to take out at least 2 of you. And the guys in the 3 beds started applauding him. It started yelling and hooting and hollering. And the pulmonologist said, hey, I had his back. I was ready to take him on right with him. So how do you not find the humor in that? That's like one of the best stories. We laughed all the way home to thinking that even with the strength that he didn't have, he got that inner strength. And boy, he was going to take at least a couple out with him.
Marine.
But yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. When he asked his doctor, Dr. Miller, what happens if I take off my oxygen? She said, you're going to die, John. And the next morning, she had done a house call. I had to call her and I said, John doesn't want his oxygen on. And she said, well, he was asking me for permission last night. Because what happened was he had gone on, to make matters worse with everything, he had gone on prednisone to help with his breathing, which is like a miracle drug. And I'm telling you, for a week, he was great. He couldn't believe. He said, I can't believe I'm dying. I feel so good. And then everything caught up with him. But the prednisone brought on the diabetes. He was always that borderline. And then it just went into the 400 and 500s. It was terrible. And that day, she said, whatever he wants you to do, you're going to do it. You're going to go out and ask him what he wants. And I don't care what you want, Diane. You're going to do whatever he wants because we know it's about him. And I come out and I said, tell me what you want. He said, I'm just tired of being sick. Been sick for 20 years. I'm just tired of it. I want my dress blues and I want them to sew on that blood stripe. I don't want it glued on my leg. He said, I want a dish of ice cream and I want a cigarette. And I'm going out with a high and tight. And you know what? He went to sleep the next day and he didn't wake up for 3 days. And then he passed in the sun porch where I'm now sitting, that we put on our house 25 years ago, in his home that he always wanted to live in. I've come to terms any longer. And I have, even though I have tears in my eyes now, I have peace in my heart and peace in my mind that we created the best life that we were given. We made the best out of it. What are you going to do? You know, this is our life. My husband suffered. We just made the best that we could do. We'd sit at the table and we just reprioritize. So, but I will tell you one thing, when he got diabetes, I had to give him a nurse. So he goes, come on, I'll talk you through this. You're going to be fine. Come on. I don't want somebody coming in here. You're going to be fine with this. So I fill up the needle and I put the insulin in, and all of a sudden he says, for God's sakes, Dee, open your eyes. I didn't want to see it. I was going to stab him with my eyes closed. And we laughed. Because you had to laugh. You have to laugh.
Well, Diane,
my husband was a good man. He was a strong man.
Yeah, Big John. Well, I can't thank you.
Big John. Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for sharing this story with us. And before I let you go, I want to just ask you, just talk a little bit about who he was outside of his suffering. What did he like to eat? What did he like to do? What were his favorite? What do you want people to know about Big John?
If there was coffee ready to be turned on in the pot, he was about that. He loved spaghetti. My husband could eat a pound of spaghetti all by himself. As a matter of fact, one of the restaurants here in town created a Big John special because that's what he ate. He was a person who he didn't like a lot of people around. He liked to be left alone. But people loved my husband. He was a good man. He was a man with a lot of common sense. He could see things clearly right from the beginning. Yeah. And a friend of mine, knowing who he was, gave him a Christmas present one year. It was a doormat of Yosemite Sam, and he had 2 guns in his hands. And on the bottom it said, go away. That's who Big John was. He really did not didn't like to call attention to himself. He never did. He never embellished anything that happened, any event or any conversation. He was who he was. He would tell me, Dee, it's all black and white to me. None of that emotional bullshit. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can say that or not, but that's who he was. But people genuinely loved my husband. He didn't like everybody. And if he didn't like you, you knew about it. He didn't have to tell you because his eyes spoke volumes. You could just see it in his face. There was always people at our house, always. The coffee was always on. He would hold court like in his garage. I'd come home at night and there'd be 1 or 2 cars here because working on cars was his hobby. And when he couldn't do it anymore, he taught the boys how to do it. He was a good man. He was not an easy man. You couldn't maneuver him around, but when we made decisions here, we made them together. But if we couldn't come to an agreement, it was his decision. And that's just the way it was. He was a hard worker. He worked his whole life. He was washing dishes at 13 years old at a diner here. Even when he got out of the service, he was working 2 jobs for a couple of years because that's what you do. You don't ask people for money. You go out and make your own money, pay your own bills, and that's what you do.
Yeah.
My husband was a good man, and he loved to fish. He didn't eat them. He said Vietnam cured him of that. He said, you haven't lived until the guy next to you is eating a 3-day old fish out of his pocket, and he's eating it. He goes, he never wanted to eat fish after that. So he, you know, he would bring them home, whatever, we cook them up. We give them to his aunts, his Italian aunts. He was a good man. And when we had the camp, and if he ever knew that furnace worked so well, it was up in the attic, he would have stayed up there all year long instead of just for the summer. No, he wasn't for everybody, but he definitely was for me. It was my choice. And I thank God that on that third date, I'm done.
Okay. Well, thank you again. I have one last question, and it's an easy one. It's a yes or no. If I ever find myself in Saratoga Springs, New York, can I still get the Big John special?
Oh my God. You know what? You probably can. You probably can. And if you can't, you come here and I'll make it for you. Because I learned how to cook Italian by all the aunts here. So.
All right. Well, that's a deal.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again. And
okay. I just didn't want to disrespect my husband's memory. I just didn't want him, make him more than who he was, because who he was more. It was enough for all of us here.
mm-hmm.
He was Big John.